Hi, welcome to my video on the addition of complex numbers. If a plus bi and d plus fi represent two different complex numbers, then their sum is a plus bi added on to d plus fi. The real parts can be added, the imaginary parts can be added. So you take the real parts, which is A and D, put them together. You take the imaginary parts, BI and FI, and put them together. And then you add up the A and the D, and you add the B and the F with the I. What I did is you factored out the I here. So let's do some examples. Simplify each as A plus BI. This is the complex form. So we're adding two complex numbers. So it's when you add, you don't change the sign, so you get 1 plus 2i, add on 3 plus 4i, so that's 1 plus 3, 2i plus 4i. Notice I just removed the brackets and add a plus sign here. I grouped the reals together, which is 1 and 3 are grouped imaginary, so that gives me a 4 plus 6i. Remember, you can only add the i's to the i's because of like terms. And again, we got a 6 minus 4i minus 8 minus i. When you're adding, you don't change the signs. You group like terms, so the reals go together and the imaginaries go together. Notice I didn't change any sign because I'm not transposing. That's a negative 2 minus 5i. That's a negative 1 right there. And we're going to add these into this form. So they're all imaginary, so I get a 3i. Negative 7 plus 10 is 3i. So if you want this form, you could go 0 plus 3i. Add them up and put a 0 because there's no real part. A is 0. And again here, now notice I have to simplify these in here first. So I have to make it, the square root of negative 9 is a 3i. The square root of a negative 4 is a 2i. Remember, the square root of a negative number is an I. The square root of 9 is 3, but an I. The square root of 4 is 2, but an I, because it's a negative number. So that's a 4 plus 3i minus 7 plus 2i. Notice I didn't change, because I'm adding, I didn't change. Group the reals together, group the imaginaries together, and that gives you negative 3 plus 5i. Now, number 5, we have something different here because we got an I squared, and an I cubed. Well, let's simplify the inside first by bedmass. So we got a 6i. Now, what is 2i squared? So that's 2 times I squared is negative 1. So that becomes a negative 2. And we got a negative 8i cubed. That's negative 8. I cubed is a negative I. So that becomes a positive 8i. So notice what I did. I simplified this square first, which is right here. I didn't do it in here. I just wrote it up here and wrote the final answer in. As you can see, I took negative 8i cubed, wrote it down here, and simplified it outside of here, and I come up with a plus 8i. Now I'm adding, so it's a 6i minus 2 minus 10 plus 8, because when you're adding, you don't change any signs. And I grouped them together, so negative 2 minus 10 plus 6i plus 8i. The reals are together, so negative 12. Imaginaries gives me 14i. A plus bi. Perfect. And number 6, I'm going to add these together. And when I do, I don't change anything. I just rewrite it. And that gives me negative 3/4 plus 1/5 i. I'm going to put the reals together And then I'm going to put the imaginaries together. So the real parts, there's a half and negative 3/4, and the 2/3 I and the 1/5 I go together. Now, I'm going to add them separately, so common denominator for these two real fractions is 4, so I multiply this one by 2/2. So that gives me 2/4 minus 3/4. And in this one, I have to multiply this one by 5/5 and multiply this one by 3/3. And that gives me 10/15 I plus 3/15 with an I. Notice the common denominator for 3 and 5 is 15, so I multiplied top and bottom 2 and 3 by 5/5. I multiplied 1/5 by 3/3 to get a common denominator of 15. Now that I have a common denominator for the reals, 2 subtract 3 is -1, and I have 15 as the denominator, so 10 plus 3 is 13i. So I grouped the reals together, I grouped the imaginaries together, and then I got common denominators. I'm adding the two of them separately. So that's the A is a -1/4, and the B is 13/15 with an I. Okay, let's do some more practice. The more practice we do, the better. Let's do it a little tiny bit faster this time. We're adding, so we don't change. When we're adding, we don't change anything. So let's group the reals together, and let's group the imaginaries together. Notice adding, I don't change any of these signs, stays the same. So that gives me a 3 plus 7i. That's a wonder. We're adding, so let's group the reals. Let's group the imaginaries. Because we're adding, the -6 stays negative, and the -2i stays negative. And that gives me a 3 minus 13i. Number 3, I should simplify these before I start to add, if I can. Square root of 16 is 4. Square root of a -4 is 2 with an I. And I got a -12. Subtract. Square root of a -100 is, square root of 100 is 10 with an I. Why an I? Because it's a negative, square root of a negative number. Notice this is the square root of -4, so it has an I. We grouped the reals together. Notice I'm adding. So I grouped the reals. 4 minus 12 plus 2i minus 10i. We don't change these signs because we're adding. So that gives us a -8 minus 8i. Add the reals, add the imaginaries. And we're going to add these together, and we get 12i plus 2i, that's 14i. And that's simplified, unless you want to write it into 0 plus 14i, meaning that the real a is 0. So you check with your teacher, 14i, or do you have to write it out like this? Because I said to simplify as a plus bi, then do I need to put the 0 in? So you have to ask your teacher, this is accepted, but do I have to do this? And number 5, notice this is 3i root 2. This is 4i root 2. This one has a I root 2, so these are like terms. Because we're adding, we got a 9 plus 2, add on 3i root 2 and 4i root 2, and that's 11 plus, and notice these are like terms, so that's an I root 2 is the like, and 3 plus 4 is 7. And again, we're adding, and everything is, so we have a -8 minus 3 minus 9i plus 2i. Because we're adding, we keep all the signs the same, and that gives me a -11 minus 7i. And we have to simplify inside this bracket first. So that's a 6i. And that's a 4. Square root of 49 is a 7. And it's an I because it's a negative. We're adding, so we don't change the sign. So the 4 is real. The 6i is added on to the negative 7i. So that gives me 4 minus I, minus 1, understood. And we have to add these together. And everything is simplified, so we have to add the reals, which is 4 over 5. Add on 2/3 minus 2/9 I minus 1/3 I. Notice I'm adding, so I didn't change any of the signs. I need a common denominator for 5 and 3, so I multiply this one by 3 over 3. Multiply this one by 5 over 5. That gives me negative 12 over 15 plus 10 over 15. And that gives me a negative 2 over 15. So I did those two first because they're the real parts. Now over here, I'm adding the i's. So I need to multiply this one by, that's a 9. The LCD for 9 and 3 is 9. So multiply by 3 over 3. That gives me negative 2 over 9i minus 1 times 3 is 3. 3 times 3 is 9. And the common denominator is a 9. And we have an I. So negative 2, negative 3 is a negative 5. Imagine, think about it. You're adding the reals together and you're adding the imaginaries together with common denominators. And a little different one here. We did the powers of I before. So let's go through and change these powers. So let's go through and change I to the 10. We got a power of 10. So we take the 10 and we divide it by 4. When we divide the 10 by 4, we get a 2 and we get a remainder of 2. So that becomes I squared. Let's leave it like that for a second. Now I got I to the 15. So 15 divided by 4. 4 and 15 goes 3. And there's 3 left over. So this is an I cubed. 8i is okay. And we have I to the 20. So 20 divided by 4 is a 5. And the remainder is 0. So that gives us I to the 0. Now, what is I squared? I squared is negative 1. And what's I cubed? I cubed is negative I. That's okay. And I to the 0 is 1. So that gives me negative 2 plus 6i plus 8i plus 7. And so we group the reals together. So negative 2 plus a 7, 6i plus 8i. And that gives us 5 plus 14i. Just a little extra with dealing with the powers because there was a video on the powers of I before. So notice you take whatever the power is greater than 4, divide it by 4, and get whatever the number is, and then get the remainder and put the remainder. So the remainder is going to be a 0, a 1, a 2, or a 3. And then I squared is negative 1, I cubed is negative I to the 0 is 1. So that's a review of adding complex numbers. If you like my video, click the like button, click the subscribe button, and the notification bell. Visit my website, www.mathfullyexplained.com, to find more information about me, my videos, and the content. And that's the content that's on my YouTube channel called Math Fully Explained. Thank you for viewing my video. Bye-bye.